Hey guys, welcome to the first podcast. I'm your host, Colton Phillips, and today we have a very special guest, Jason Tremblay. I'm assuming most of you guys know, but that is Taylor Atwood's coach. Taylor recently had a very big comeback performance, his biggest total ever. So today we're going to be going into some of the behind the scenes training and programming, maybe weight strategies that went into that. So that being said, let's get right into it. So the strength guys in a lot of recent podcasts, I've heard you guys talk about, in 2021, your approach was really pushing up the volume. So maybe in 2018, you were doing something like 30,000 pounds of volume on squat, then maybe 40. And then I think it peaked in around 2021 at like 55-ish. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Could you talk about just your thought process going into this prep? If you guys did new peak volumes, maybe why or why not?
Yeah, so Taylor started powerlifting in 2014. He's 37 now, so he's much older. And for most of his career, he was in the 74 kilo class. Largely, strength is proportional to a muscle size, and so the longer you're staying in one weight class, the harder it becomes to continue to make strength gains. I think one of the main advantages that we had with Taylor, in addition to his talent, which is extraordinary, is that our training approach was constantly measurably progressing him in the 2010s. So whereas, I think other training approaches that are based more on experience and less on data are less likely to push someone beyond the coach's experience and what they feel is a reasonable norm. Taylor's training approach continued to grow and measurably progress from prep to prep. And that started in 2018. When he went from doing about 8,000 kilos of squat volume per week up to 13,000, and his performance dramatically improved. And then each prep, we just progressed the amount of volume he was doing. So by the time he had his best meet at 74 in 2021, he was doing as you said, close to 55,000 pounds of squat volume per week. And he was fine with that for over a year. We had no problems. And his performance was so far ahead of what other competitors in his division were doing. And also, he was closing in on competitors in weight classes up from him. So I think this was a strength of the approach at that time. That said, after Taylor had his son, he had a long string of injuries, and it seemed like they were connected to one another, as injuries often are. So this is called a compensatory injury. So you have an injury in one area, your movements compensate. You get an injury in another area, and then get an injury in another area because you're compensating for the previous two injuries. And it's just like the injuries pinballing around. And the question was, what location is this going to be next? The problem for us was that we were constantly trying to peak for meets. We're trying to peak for Sheffield. We're trying to defend his world championship. And when you have a spiral of injuries, peaking for competition is really the last thing that you need to be doing. It's much better to give the body time to heal. But when you don't have that time to heal because you're under the gun and you have to do what you have to do, you have to do your best and live with the increased risk of something more happening. So we were in that situation. We had a tremendous fall from grace. So our best total at 74 was 838.5. We ended up losing the world championship in 2023 with the 777.5 total. And then Taylor took a year and a half off from competing. He was going through some personal life challenges as well, and just needed to get his body and mind right and get healthy again to see how he would resume his powerlifting career. Throughout someone's powerlifting career, most often they will compete in at least 2 weight classes, if not more. And that's because as someone powerlifts, they also build muscle and they get heavier, and it becomes the logical next option when someone hits a plateau. Let's try to gain some weight and get past this and continue getting stronger. So after a decade in 74s, we decided to go up to the 83s. When we went up to the 83s, we had to add in another day of training that Taylor was not doing. So when Taylor, all throughout his time as a 74, he was training 4 times per week. But now Taylor had so many different injuries and areas that he needed to strengthen and maintain low tolerance in, that we had to train 5 days per week. Since he's come back to 83, he's doing less main lift volume than he was at his best in 74, but he's doing more overall training because the amount of things that we need to address. I think for powerlifting American Nationals, honestly, after Scary Strong in October, we felt Taylor was around 850 at that meet if we really redlined him and pushed him. But he was still dealing with the after effects of some of the injuries that had bothered him for the last 1.5 years. So it was a conservative meet in October. We knew we were going to have to be around 880 at the very least in October. And then as we saw Joe's training, we're like, okay, like we're going to have to be around 900 to beat him. And so we teamed up with Dr. Zach Robinson of Data Driven Strength, who's a friend of PSG. We consulted with him, made some changes to Taylor's training approach back in November. So this is about 5-6 months out. And all was going well until Taylor's second son was born. And then readiness problems arose. And then Taylor tweaked his back walking out a squat, of all things, something that he's done thousands of times in his life. So for 6 weeks in this prep, we were doing isolation exercises in a partial range of motion because he was unable to train. And we're just doing bench press. And with 6 weeks out, his back was fine to continue training. So we quickly had to put together a training plan to get Taylor ready to compete against Joe, because it was not interesting to us to show up just to compete. We show up to compete to win. And so it's either we were going to be competitive for the win or we were not going to compete, because it's not who we are. So I really felt under the gun as Taylor's coach. We had missed all this time training. Well, we missed all this time training because of Taylor's back injury. We couldn't even rehab his hamstring, which was still kind of bothering him a little bit. So I don't know if he's going to tolerate things. And so what I did was I told Taylor, I told everyone else in the team, I've trained Taylor for over a third of my life. I know how to get him strong, and you put me under the gun, and this is the training program that I'm going to give him. And it was pretty similar to what he did in 2021. But of course, it was less volume because we didn't have the conditioning for it that we did then. And so we did a 2-week reintroduction to lifting, a 2-week volume peak, a 1-week intensity peak, and then we tapered them and sent them into powerlifting American Nationals. And that was our prep. and it went really well, but on competition day. And I'm really glad that Taylor was able to showcase how special of an athlete he is. I really can't say that performance was due to us having this, amazing training cycle void of problems. It was riddled with issues, and as we like to call it, it was like a bubblegum and duct tape prep. We're just trying to put things together the best we can. So that was the story of how Taylor trained in the 2010s when he was on top as a 74, what happened to us since, and where he is now.
Awesome. Thank you for that. It's crazy. Taylor obviously has great coaching, crazy work ethic, but it's just like remarkable someone can get that strong in that short of a time period. Like, that's unheard of, to go from maybe top end of 850 to what did you say his top end was at nationals? 890s?
890, 895, I think. Yeah. Obviously we really went for it on deadlift. 342 is a bit heavier than a second attempt should be for us right now. I think when a powerlifter goes balls to the wall on deadlift, they can tire themselves out with how heavy their second attempt is, and then have less strength on their third attempt deadlift compared to if they built up to express their strength on their third attempt deadlift. So yeah, I think had we not been in a dogfight to get to 900 kilos and we selected the attempts differently, I think maybe we could have ended on 895. However, hindsight is always crystal clear what a lifter is capable of doing. And you can't select the fourth attempt based on how the third attempt moves, because there is no fourth attempt. So there's a lot of people who will commentate and say, oh, you got that third attempt call wrong and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not a part of the training process and the part of making the strategy, and you're not backstage making the call, then it's not obvious what the limit of the lifter is. The reality is that, like, Taylor had a 2-to-1 good lift on his third attempt squat. If you add 5 kilos to it, does he make it on strength? Probably. Does he cut it an inch higher? I don't know, right? Like, we're really like splitting hairs there. And then on bench press, he hit 210 touch and go in his final heavy session on a rogue fat pad. So it's pretty unimaginable that based on a 210 touch and go, where his butt was debatably in contact with the bench, that he's going to hit 220 a week later. Like, these are things that we learn after. I went backstage after bench and I'm like, you know what? We raised your opener, Taylor, and we went up 10 and 9 kilos for your second attempt, and then second and third attempt. These are big jumps on bench, and you still had more. Next time, we just need to trust that your final heavy bench and training may look rough, but your performance really tends to skyrocket on meet day. And we'll just have a more aggressive strategy in place so that we're not leaving those kilos on the board. So if you consider that Taylor hits depth with 5 kilos heavier than 317.5 on squat, which is, man, it's 50-50 whether that's going to be a good lift or not, in my opinion. It's truly going to the limit. And then you add 5 kilos to bench, we're at 888. And then let's say that we take different deadlift attempts and we end up pulling like 355, 357. I don't know, that adds up to like 895 or something. So I think that's about where we were on a perfect day, which is, hindsight is 2020. So we did our best, and Joe is the deserving champion, and it was awesome meet to be a part of.
Yeah, that really gives Taylor a lot of motivation coming to these next ones, though. You can see on his stories, he seems more motivated than ever. But you touched on his bench and the peak in that a little bit. I'd like to circle back to that. He was benching on the fat pad most of, if not just about all of his prep from what he was posting, it seemed like, including his heavy singles. And I believe he gets maybe about 5 kilos out of that. Was that a strategy maybe to keep him healthy? And then going into the meet on meet day, just going on the regular bench, you're assuming the peak will kind of make up for the difference? Or was there something else going on?
Well, at Scary Strong, he got the bench on the Eleiko Sky Pad, and it was helpful for his bench press. Taylor thought, along with some other powerlifters in the New York area, that the Rogue Fat Pad was the closest thing to the Sky Pad. I personally don't agree with that. I think they're quite different when you just feel both bench pads. But that's why he was training on the Rogue Fat Pad. It wasn't a strategy of trying to keep him healthy by lifting on certain equipment or not. It was just trying to train as close to what he felt he would be lifting on in competition.
Okay, yeah, that totally clears that up. That makes sense. And then also with his bench in particular, usually maybe a deadlift is something that peaks super well into a meet compared to a bench. Most lifters don't get a massive peak like he did, like the touch and go 210 to that 216 he had on his third. It honestly looked like a second attempt. Like he probably could have done like 221, like you were saying. Could you talk a little bit about the strategy behind his peak and why you think it was so successful compared to the average lifter, just what the average coach could take from that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is how great of a competitor Taylor is. I remember having lunch with Taylor and Mike Teixeira at a previous nationals, and we were talking about an athlete being in the zone, like in basketball. You know, it's just you can't miss. Every shot you take is going in. And I asked him, I'm like, do you guys think that you can get in that zone in powerlifting and lift more because you are in that zone? And they said, hands down, yes. And that answer kind of surprised me because maximum strength and maximum speed, I believed beforehand that your capability is your capability, and it's hard to tap into that much more. But they were unequivocally, yes, when I am in the zone, put whatever you want on the bar within reason, and I'm going to make it. And Taylor and his dad are amazing at tapping into that psychology and that extra bit of drive that Taylor needs to lift out of his mind. And I think that comes from his life in sports. Before powerlifting, Taylor made it to the CFL, the Canadian Football League, as a running back. He's a very high-level football player. And he knows how to perform when he's under the gun. And a lot of people aren't gifted in the way that Taylor is when it comes to being able to perform on demand when under pressure. So that's the first thing. He rises to the occasion, and others will kind of like have a more muted response or even like kind of hurtle away because they're not able to rise to the occasion. The next thing is Taylor responds best to high training volumes, and I think most people do, but Taylor to a significant degree. When you give Taylor a low volume training program with a lot of high intensity lifting, it beats him up fast. Actually, the best way to train him is with 70 to 90% training intensities and higher volumes and very little amounts of heavy lifting above 90%. But the thing is that when you're doing so many sets and so many reps, his chest gets tired. And that's why his butt starts coming off from the final workouts. And so his chest is tired. And when we taper, his chest isn't tired on meet day anymore. So you can see the true expression of strength that you can't see in training. So this is when a taper is at its best too. You have an athlete who is pushing, building fitness, but they're not able to express it fully in training because force production in a range of motion is maybe dampened by the fatigue. And then you let them recover and boom, there's more performance there. So that's always been the case with Taylor, but it hasn't been as pronounced as it is now because he's not cutting weight for competition anymore. He's just eating 3,000 calories every day leading into a meet, and so it's a more robust peaking effect.
Yeah, that all totally makes sense. I mean, not having to cut into a competition, it's kind of tough to tell because he's probably not peaking in training, how much that takes away, and then he finally just eats right into the competition, not worrying about water weight, and you can really see the big difference that a lot of times, I mean, if he stayed in the same weight class forever, he'd have no idea how much extra he'd really get out of that peak.
Yeah, like I remember when Taylor had his 2 best 74 meets, he went into the gym a couple days after he hit, I think it was like 812 or something, and he deadlifted 357 and a half. And then I remember after he hit 838.5, he went into the gym a couple days after and benched 215. And so we had these clues along the way of how strong Taylor would be when he didn't have to cut. So yeah, but I mean, each competition you learn, right? And so one of the main takeaways is that we have to trust our training more, and we have to put a more aggressive strategy in place for Taylor's bench. Trust him, trust what we do, and the extra kilos that don't seem visibly apparent in training will be there on meet day.
Yeah, and you mentioned his deadlift as well. Taylor mentioned, I think in a post or two, maybe even you mentioned it at one point, he said he wasn't able to get in enough volume, it sounded like, in prep. Something came up. I don't know if it was like the birth of his child, he had to miss a session, or if it was some like nagging injury, he had to miss some volume. Didn't quite show up as well as the other lifts where he wanted to his standard. Could you talk a little bit about like what happened and then changes that you're going to implement to deadlift in the 8s going forward?
Yeah, so Taylor had a back injury that he sustained in the squat walkout, and that just most heavily affected our deadlift training. In terms of what I want to do moving forward, Taylor needs more posterior chain assistance work, especially for the proximal hamstrings and the glutes. Just because of his chronic proximal hamstring tendon injury that he's had for a year and a half, which is thankfully no longer bothering him. So we need to keep that area really strong. We do more conventional deadlift now, further out from meets, just to vary his movement and develop his spinal erectors a little bit more as well. Even though, like, I think one of the characteristics of these like truly elite lifters is it sounds weird, but like when I hang out with my clients, especially ones that I've trained for a long time, like often I'll greet them with a hug, and I know what kind of meet we're gonna have when my hand lands on their spinal erector and I feel a freaking tree trunk instead of a muscle, and it's like, okay, like you're really strong right now. And when Taylor was hitting 777 and a half at Sheffield in 2023 Worlds, that muscle felt deflated. But when I gave him a hug before the meet at PA Nationals, I was like, oh yeah, like we're back, So and it's the same way with Leah Bavla too. It's like, man, like her spinal erectors are freaking ginormous. They're like bridge cable wires. They're going to hold any amount of weight that you put on it. And that ability to transfer force from your lower body into the bar it's so important. And I found that lifters who aren't at this prodigious level of talent, they don't have the muscle mass back there that Taylor and Leah do. So it's just like an anecdote I've had through the years. But anyways, we're doing more conventional deadlift further out from meets. About 8 weeks out, we go to sumo. Taylor really just needs to get more reps in on deadlift. When he pulled 340 at 74, he was doing around 36,000 pounds of volume per week, that prep. And now, we're like 50 to 60% of that right now. So we just need to bump the training up, bump up the assistance work for his hamstrings and glutes. And I'm confident the deadlift will be there. The main problem in this prep was just the back injury, honestly.
Yeah, it's nice to know that he can hit. He probably had 355, 357, like you were saying on the day. And whenever you can actually push that from 50, 60% of his old volumes all the way up closer to 100 or more, he's going to have a big growth spurt for sure. With that being said, I guess we can use Taylor as an example. How would you expect an athlete or Taylor to feel going through their training? So say they got 6 weeks of training. They've got the 4 weeks where maybe they're pushing volume more, doing an intro, and then the 2 weeks of the taper. Are you looking, when you're pushing volume hard, is the athlete coming to the gym most of the time feeling pretty beat up? They're just trying to like survive, get through, make sure they stay injury free, make sure technique stays good, and just get in the work? Or is that kind of a time where in your system an athlete's like, actually, I'm starting to, like, it might feel a little heavier on my back, might be a little more sore, but I'm actually feeling stronger here? Or like I said, the opposite, where you don't really realize it until you get a taper or a deload? Because compared to like the average, not the average, I guess there's a lot of different systems. I know you guys don't like the 4 week blocks. That totally makes sense to me too. The body's not in 4 week blocks, just train however is going to work for you. Maybe an athlete wants to feel really good in week 3 and 4, week 1 and 2, they're letting off some fatigue. But could you touch a little bit on your system and how you expect the bar to be moving, your velocity trackers, how the athlete feels, and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think just because you're increasing volume doesn't mean that you're going to be beat up. I would argue that people who train too heavy feel beat up the same amount, if not more. So if you were only to do singles, very low volume, frequently above 90%, I think most powerlifters would break. So it's not a matter of volume beating you up and being fatiguing. I think the training design has to fit the individual. When I write a training program for someone, I expect them to get better. And that, they may not be showing all of their performance in an ordinary week of training, but I expect when I review their training journals and their videos that I'm seeing improvement over time. So if I'm looking at like a block, so a 4 week stint of training, I would like to see increased performance and the achievement of the training objectives that I set out to achieve in that 4 weeks. If I haven't seen those two things, then it's been an unsuccessful training program and I need to adjust things, right? So I expect his performance to go up. I expect his velocity loss to be incredibly minimal in an introductory phase. So we had 6 weeks. 2 of them were intro, 3 were raising volume and intensity, and the final one was starting to taper volume, peak intensity, and then we tapered. In the intro weeks, I expect minimal to no velocity loss. We didn't have a threshold on it. We would just watch his videos. It would be bad if he was like losing significant amounts of speed, because this is supposed to be easy work, and then in the 3 weeks after, as training gets harder, I'm expecting to see more moderate amounts of velocity loss. But we weren't using cutoffs like, Taylor, you can only lose 15% velocity before you have to lower the weight. We were just watching him train. And if we felt like there was a problem, we would go in and adjust his program for the next workout. But that didn't happen. Actually, every week that Taylor trained, he probably added like 5 to 10 kilos to his total. That's just like his rate of adaptation. And I like to work with other coaches. So we have a collaborative coaching team, and I'm not the only one. And I told Patrick, Urban, and Kedrick, I'm like, just watch, like he's going to be like 10 kilos stronger by next week, because I know how special of an athlete Taylor is, and it just like total just went north, So I expected him to get stronger. That's why I wrote the training program the way I did. I think there's too much of a focus on fatigue in coaching, because it's not the fatigue relationship that we're manipulating. It's the fitness fatigue relationship. So when you train, you stimulate adaptation, but you also cause fatigue. And ultimately, your performance is the average between the fitness you've gained and the fatigue you've caused. So you want to structure training in such a way where the lifter is gaining fitness, but they're also able to still have a reasonable amount of recovery, so that you're seeing their performance go up over time. And then when you taper them and there's no fatigue, you want to maintain the fitness that they've gained, but get rid of the fatigue to give them a little bit of bump for the competition. So I think it's really important to understand this relationship, its theory, and how that ties over into monitoring training as well.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. That's something I've always personally wondered about your system. If the velocities are getting faster each week, it sounds like he's putting 10 kilos on his total each week. So clearly he's adapting really well, and it worked great. And then just gets that extra little bump when you start pulling it off and pushing intensities higher. And you talked on a post you made on maybe the Strength Guys account or your own about that training polarity that you did this time. So it sounded like, just to recap that post, in the more volume type phases, you're really pulling back on intensity, keeping sets more submaximal, and then going into those last 2 weeks when you push the top singles, getting ready for the meet, you pulled back a lot on the volume to recover. Is that summing it up pretty well?
So in general, yes. Like I've started coaching more top level 120 kilo lifters, and also talking to Matt Gary. He's a really close friend, and he coaches Ray Williams. Like, just kind of getting anecdotes from how Matt works with Ray and his problem solved there. I realized that as an athlete gets stronger and stronger, we are, if you're going to really push training volume, then you need to watch it with training intensity too. So if you're going to have higher volume, just don't go overboard with the training intensity. And then if you're going to have very high training intensity, you can't go overboard with the training volume. So when Taylor was younger and had less injuries, we would push him high volume and high intensity. But now we have to pick our spots and be a little bit more focused on what the goal of the program is. So the reasons why you would train with high volume are to improve work capacity, promote gains in muscle size, and to improve technique efficiency, because when you do more reps, you have more opportunities to master a skill. The reasons why you train with high intensity are to increase intramuscular coordination. So improving a person's ability to produce neural drive, maximize muscle force production, so that they can express their strength in competition. Additionally, when you train with high intensity, it's also the chance to practice the gains in technique efficiency that you made with lighter weights. We need to now transfer those into what you're going to do in competition. And it's important to have both. You can't, I don't believe that training will be effective or as effective as it can be unless you are alternating between periods of training with higher volume to promote more structural and physiological adaptations and periods of high intensity to promote more neural adaptations. So yeah, depending on an athlete's strength level, work capacity, will either push intensity and volume harder, or in the case of Taylor, now we have to, when we're pushing volume, be careful on intensity, and when we're pushing intensity, be more careful on volume.
That makes total sense. And I got a little bit of a hypothetical for you. How do you think Taylor's training approach would have differed if he remained a 74? I think Taylor likely had some more kilos even the day he did 838.5 on that total. I guess, yeah, he missed that bench. I think it was a 5 kilo one, just jumped the press command. So he clearly had more. But do you think he would have done a very similar approach? Maybe would have had to push training harder because the weight gain wasn't helping. Maybe that would have been harder with just the extra food isn't there for recovery. Have you thought about that a little bit?
Yeah. Without everything that's happened to us, I wouldn't be as effective at my job as I am now. I really learned a lot problem solving and helping Taylor through that challenging period. So even though it really was a blow to our egos, it was one of the best things for me as a coach to be able to help him through this period and become more complete and well equipped at my job. So I'm grateful for the challenges that we faced, even though they were extremely hard, and it was trying for both of us. If Taylor didn't have the compensatory injuries that he had after he hit 838.5 and his son was born, we probably would have continued training very similar to the way that we were. And I would have expected Taylor to be well beyond 850 at 74. In fact, leading into Powerlifting American Nationals in 2022, which is going to be our next meet, I thought he was easily at a 310, if not 315 squat. Going into that meet, we hit 202.5 on bench. And when he's training without issue and his squat goes up, normally his deadlift goes up. So we felt like 850 was like a box to check, but we were more so focused on like 860, 870, like going higher than that. It's not a realistic scenario though, right? Because the challenges that came up, and we'll never know. I don't think it's in our plans to go back down to 74. This is just better for 37-year-old Taylor to stay healthy and manage everything that he's got going on in his life to compete as an 83.
Yeah, maybe we'll see 93 Taylor before we see 74 Taylor. But with that being said, do you have any just general advice for athletes of different levels? Because I know it's going to look a little bit different if someone's going up a weight class and they've been a Taylor Atwood and they're the peak of powerlifting, when he might have to go up a weight class versus a novice powerlifter or an intermediate. Do you have some kind of recommendations for each level of powerlifter and when they should go up a class?
So I think a novice powerlifter, it's best just to foster training habits, a love for training, a love for competing, learn the sport, enjoy the community of the sport, and don't get discouraged by what you see the best of the best doing, because I mean, there's a reason why more people aren't that strong, right? Like you have to have really elite athletic talent to be at the very top level of powerlifting. But just if you don't have that very elite athletic talent, powerlifting has many benefits to your health, to your sense of community, to giving a purpose to your life and a sense of responsibility. There's so many ways you can benefit from this. So don't let comparison be the thief of your joy in powerlifting. For a novice lifter that has graduated to, you've done a few meets, you've gotten significantly stronger, maybe you're at your state or provincial level of competition now. I think it's wise to keep your training approach basic. Make sure that progressive overload is a part of it. So measure your training. Know how much weight you're lifting each week by putting it in a training journal. And if you're technically savvy, know how much weekly tonnage you're doing. So sets times reps times load on each lift. You want to progress that over time. If you're doing the same thing over time or less than you were before, the stimulus to adapt is not progressive, and you are unlikely to get better at your current body weight. And just stick with it. I think most people in powerlifting quit after their first competition. It's going to take time because, as Ryan Doris said, I really like this post. He was talking about boredom, people feeling bored of training. And he said, be grateful for the boredom, because when life hits you hard, whether it's injuries or personal challenges or whatever, you will look back and just want the normal training where you're not in pain or you're not struggling with something. And the second thing is that you are not on your timeline, you're on biology's timeline. We can't forget that we are in the practice of trying to stimulate adaptations in our body to become the strongest version of ourselves. That is not a fast process. That is a very slow and long process. So it's going to take time to become the strongest version of you. And I think the other thing is make lifts in competition. Going 6 for 9 is not the way to maximize your total. So I recommend reading Matt Gary's book on that. And really my tips for intermediate and elite powerlifters are the same.
And we're running down to about our last 15 minutes. So I'll just ask you one more question. You touched a little bit on his deadlifts already and going forward, but is there anything that you guys learned from these last, I guess, years of training that we haven't touched on, or just this prep in particular, that you're going to tweak going into his next meets, whether it's Worlds, NAPF, whatever he ends up doing next? Is there anything that you guys are wanting to tweak?
I wish for no fluky injuries to pop up before NAPF, and otherwise I would like to spend more time training with similar amounts of training to what Taylor did before Powerlifting American Nationals. I think he's going to get a lot stronger that way. That said, he's 37. He has a lot going on in his life, and we've had a lot of challenges already. So I don't assume that there's going to be better days ahead. We're well aware that we're on the back nine of his powerlifting career, and closer to hole 18 than we are to hole 9. And so we're grateful for every opportunity that we have to compete. We're very hungry to get back to being the best in the class. We really want to go to a world championship again, and we really want to win. But that is not going to be handed to us on a silver platter. It's going to be earned. So I think the main changes that we've made are, and this has been really nice, because in addition to Taylor being an athlete for a really long time, we're also good friends. we talk more now. So just on a friendship level, this is excellent. But on a coach-athlete level, it allows us to be more responsive with what he needs in his training program. And so we're going to communicate more. We're going to do our best to manage injury risk, and we're going to continue training him the way that we know how, because it works really, really well. So, yeah, our goal is to go beyond 900 at NAPF.
Yeah, that's going to be super fun to watch. At least this time, you're not going to have a child born all in the middle of it. My sister had a kid 11 months ago now, and I genuinely have no idea how he was able to come up with such a big total with that all happening, like hardly getting sleep. You've got so much more stress, so much on your mind. That's a testament to how well your guys' system's working, how hard he's working, what kind of a special talent he is, all of that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not a parent yet, but I aspire to be. So I suppose I'll learn those challenges one day. Nothing that I say is designed to excuse our performance or anything like that. Man, like, in addition to being a worthy champion, Joe seems like a great guy. I really appreciated his energy. He's very respectful, classy. It seems like he and his coach have a super intelligent approach, and I admire them and am inspired by them. So yeah, just because Taylor had a kid and had an injury, we're not like, oh, boo-hoo, we could have done more. We had the challenges that we had. Our challenges are our problems. We are aware that every other competitor has their problems too, and we're not trying to compare problems. Our performance is our performance. But on podcasts like this, I think it's nice to also share how we confronted these challenges. And I think there's helpful bits of knowledge for the community in there.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the average person isn't tailoring their entire life around powerlifting. So, I mean, maybe a Russell or he has that life, but or a Joe Borenstein, but the average person that listens to this podcast is someone that, might have a kid. Pretty much every powerlifter can have an injury at some point. So that's super important stuff to hear, or just balancing. I know Taylor has a full-time job as well, which is, and it's a demanding job at that. So that's another pretty remarkable thing that he's got going for him. But yeah, the average person, that's probably the most important thing they can hear about, and how to fit this all into their life. And setbacks happen, but you can keep working and how to work around them. With that being said, though, I really appreciate you coming on. If you'd like to share with people where they can find you, that sort of thing, go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. You were excellent interviewer. So I can hardly believe that this is one of your first podcasts, because you did great, man.
Thank you.
Our Instagram is at The Strength Guys, and my personal Instagram is at JasonTSG. If you're interested in signing up for our online powerlifting coaching services, go to thestrengthguys.com, click on coaching, and that's where you'll find us.
Great. Thank you again, Jason. Yeah, this is literally the first podcast, so what better guests to have on? Really appreciate you taking the offer, even though we don't have any podcasts out yet. So yeah, thank you, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
I'm honored, and well done once again.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.